Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file that I think a lot of us have a deeply personal, almost addictive connection to, even if we don't fully understand the massive business machinery grinding away behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
We are talking about Redfin.
It is absolutely a household name. In fact, for a certain demographic, it's practically a hobby.
It really is a hobby.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, let's just be honest about how people actually use this product. For most of us, Redfin isn't just a real estate brokerage.
No, not all.
It's the app you open on your phone at 11:00 p.m. on a Tuesday when you can't sleep. You're scrolling through photos of mid-century moderns you absolutely cannot afford, or maybe, you're hate scrolling through your neighbor's listing to see if they updated that hideous kitchen before they put it on the market.
The Zestimate stalking.
It feels like a utility or a game almost.
It's the ultimate window shopping experience for sure, but
Yeah.
when you actually dig into the stack of articles, the financial filings, and just the sheer history we have on the table today, it is so much more than just a digital map or a gallery of photos.
It really is. It's the story of a 20-year war, a struggle to drag a very old school, very physical, and very guarded industry residential real estate into the digital age.
Kicking and screaming, I imagine.
Kicking and screaming. And it's a story with a beginning, a middle, and as we now know, a very specific end.
That's the key context here. We need to orient ourselves, right? We are recording this in February 2026.
Right.
And looking back from where we sit now, the landscape has completely shifted. As of July 2025, just last year, Redfin is no longer the independent disruptor it used to be.
No.
It is now a subsidiary of rocket companies.
Which is a massive development that we are absolutely going to have to unpack. We have to view this entire timeline through that lens. We're looking at a company that started as a scrappy, thumb your nose at the establishment startup in 2004 and ended up being acquired by a massive lending giant 2 decades later. So the question we're trying to answer today is, did they win? Did they actually change how we buy and sell homes? Or did the industry eventually just change them?
That is the million-dollar question. Or, given where home prices are in 2026, maybe the $2 million question.
Fair point. And the cast of characters here is just fascinating. We aren't just talking about your standard real estate agents in blazers. We've got a medical school dropout, a Yale engineer, and a data miner from Amazon.
It sounds like the setup to a very nerdy joke, doesn't it? A doctor, an engineer, and a data scientist walk into a bar.
It does. It absolutely does. But that mix is exactly why this story goes the way it does. So our mission today is to deeply unpack this journey. We're going to look at how Redfin tried to break the brokerage model, where they ran into massive walls, both legal and financial, and what this sale to rocket companies actually means for the future of real estate.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, the origin story. Because like I said, this doesn't start in a Century 21 office with someone handing out business cards. It starts with some very unlikely founders in Seattle. We have to talk about David Eraker.
David Eraker is such a fascinating figure to start with because his background is the furthest thing from selling houses. He was actually a medical school student.
At the University of Washington.
At the University of Washington, yes.
Wait, hold on. He was actively in med school.
He was. And he didn't just graduate and then switch careers. He dropped out. He left a path that is arguably one of the most stable, prestigious, and high-income careers you can choose to go into software design and eventually start a startup.
That speaks to a serious, almost irrational appetite for risk. I mean, leaving med school is not a small life decision.
Not at all.
You've got the sunken cost of the education, the expectations. It just suggests he saw an opportunity, or maybe a problem, that was just too big to ignore.
It was a problem born of personal frustration. The story goes that Eraker was trying to buy a home himself in Seattle. And you have to remember, this is the early 2000s.
Right.
The internet existed, sure, but real estate was still operating like it was 1985. He found the process just opaque, frustrating, and incredibly inefficient. He felt like the agents held all the cards, specifically the data, and he was just begging for scraps of information.
So it was the classic scratch your own itch founder story.
Yeah.
But he couldn't fix it alone. He had the vision, but he wasn't a coder.
Right. He needed technical muscle. And that's where Michael Dougherty comes in. He's the second founder, holding degrees in electrical engineering and international studies from Yale. So now you have the visionary dropout and the Ivy League engineering backbone.
But then there's the third piece of the puzzle. And looking at the notes here, this feels like the secret sauce that differentiated them from just being another website. David Selinger.
David Selinger is absolutely key to understanding why Redfin wasn't just a digital brochure. He was a Stanford alum, but more importantly, look at his resume. He had previously led the R&D arm of Amazon's data mining and personalization team.
Let's pause on that. Amazon data mining. In 2004,
Yes.
that feels light years ahead of where the real estate industry was.
Oh, it was. Think about what Amazon was doing in the early 2000s. They were pioneering collaborative filtering.
Right. The people who bought this also bought this thing.
Exactly. They were figuring out how to use massive amounts of data to predict what you wanted before you knew you wanted it. People who bought this book also bought this blender. Selinger brought that specific mentality. That data is a predictive asset to real estate.
So while other brokerages were thinking about curb appeal, baking cookies for open houses, and firm handshakes, these guys are thinking about data analytics, personalization engines, and collaborative filtering.
Precisely. Bringing Amazon-level data mining to real estate in 2004 was a paradigm shift. It signaled that Redfin wasn't just building a brokerage, they were building a data engine. They weren't just trying to sell houses, they were trying to structure unstructured information.
And that leads us to their first big innovation, which seems so simple now, but at the time was huge.
Yeah.
The map.
The map-based search. They launched this in Seattle in 2004.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here. For anyone listening today, especially the younger generation, this sounds ridiculous. Oh, they put houses on a map. Big deal.
Right.
Every app does that. I can see a map of where my pizza delivery driver is right now. Why was this such a heavy lift?
We take it for granted now because we live in a world of Google Maps APIs where you can drop a map into an app in 10 minutes. But in 2004, this was a technical nightmare.
So Google Maps didn't exist in the way we know it.
Google Maps as a platform barely existed. They couldn't just plug into it.
So how do they do it?
They had to scrape tax records. You have to understand, real estate data was fragmented across thousands of county clerk offices, often on paper or in ancient mainframe systems.
Right.
It wasn't digitized. They had to ingest all that raw data, normalize it, and then physically plot it onto satellite imagery that they had to license.
That sounds excruciating.
It was. And remember the user experience before this. If you were searching for a home online, if you could even do that effectively, you were looking at lists.
Yeah, just a list of addresses.
The list of addresses, maybe some thumbnails. 123 Maple Street, 3-bed, 2-bath. If you wanted to see where that was relative to a park or a school or the highway, you had to get out a physical Thomas Guide map or maybe use MapQuest if you were tech-savvy and cross-reference.
Right, or you had to rely entirely on an agent. The agent held the book. The big physical book of listings. The agent knew the neighborhoods. You're driving blind without them.
Exactly. The agent was the gatekeeper. Redfin took that power, the power of spatial context, and gave it to the user. Putting everything on a satellite map was a foundational shift in user experience.
It turned the user into an explorer.
It turned the consumer from a passive recipient of information into an active explorer, yeah. You could drag the map and see home prices pop up. That was revolutionary.
It effectively democratized the where. But they didn't stop at just showing the houses, did they? They decided that just being a search engine wasn't enough. They wanted to get involved in the actual transaction. And this is where things get a little spicy. Let's move to Section 2, disrupting the brokerage model.
This is where the rubber meets the road. It's one thing to show data. It's another thing entirely to mess with people's money.
Right.
And in real estate, the money is in the commissions.
So in 2006, Redfin launches buying and selling services in Seattle and the Bay Area. But they didn't just hire a bunch of agents and say, go forth and sell. They fundamentally changed the employment model. Can you explain the difference between how a traditional agent works and how a Redfin agent worked?
This is the crucial economic differentiator. In the traditional model, Coldwell Banker, Remax, Keller Williams, you name it, the agents are almost always independent contractors.
1099 workers.
They are 1099 workers. They eat what they kill. They don't get a salary. They don't get benefits. They only get paid when they close a deal.
Which incentivizes them to close deals at all costs, right? To get that paycheck.
Theoretically, yes. It creates a very high-pressure, sales-driven environment. Redfin flipped this. They made their agents W-2 employees.
So they were on staff. They got a paycheck every 2 weeks.
Exactly. Salary, health benefits, paid time off. And their bonuses were based on customer satisfaction surveys, not just the commission amount of the deal.
That sounds great for the consumer. You get an agent who isn't desperate to force you into a house just to pay their rent. But it also sounds incredibly expensive for Redfin.
It is more expensive in terms of fixed costs. You have to pay that salary whether the market is hot or cold, right?
Right.
But the trade-off was supposed to be efficiency. Because Redfin had the website, the map, they had a fire hose of leads. Traditional agents spend half their time marketing themselves, knocking on doors, sending out calendars. Redfin agents didn't have to do that. The app gave them the customers.
So the theory was.
So Redfin's theory was, our agents will be 5x or 10x more productive than a normal agent, so we can afford the salaries.
And because they were theoretically more efficient, they could attack the price. Let's talk about the refund.
The commission refund. This was their battering ram. Historically, real estate commissions are rigid. Typically 6% of the sale price, split 50-50 between the buyer's agent and the seller's agent.
So 3% goes to each side.
3% goes to the person helping you buy the house, which on a $500,000 house is $15,000. That's a lot of money.
A ton of money.
It is. Redfin said, we don't need all that. We'll take a cut, but we'll refund a significant portion of that 3% back to you, the buyer, at closing.
So I buy a house and I get a check for $5,000 or $10,000 to help with closing costs or furniture.
That was the pitch. They were compressing fees in an industry that relies on those fees to survive.
That must have made them incredibly popular with home buyers and incredibly unpopular with every other real estate agent in the country.
Unpopular is a very polite way of putting it. It was a declaration of war. You have to understand the psychology here. Traditional agents viewed Redfin not just as a competitor, but as an existential threat. They argued that Redfin was devaluing the profession, treating it like a fast food transaction rather than a high-stakes consultation.
I can imagine.
There were stories of traditional agents refusing to show Redfin listings or telling clients that Redfin agents were incompetent, part-timers.
And despite the pushback, it worked for the consumers.
Yeah.
By 2007, they were expanding rapidly. Southern California, Boston, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. And steering the ship during this expansion was Glenn Kelman, right? He was named CEO in September 2005.
Yes, Glenn Kelman. He became the face of this disruption, and he was perfect for it because he was very articulate, very fast-talking, and he wasn't afraid to go on television and say, the emperor has no clothes, the way we sell houses is broken.
A good frontman.
He positioned Redfin as the consumer advocate against the cartel of traditional real estate.
Speaking of cartels, we have to talk about the data wars. Because if you come at the king, you best not miss. And the king in this scenario was the MLS.
The multiple listing service.
For our listeners who might not know, what exactly is the MLS? Is it a government database?
No, and that's a very common misconception. The MLS is not a public utility. It is a private, member-owned cooperative, usually owned by the local association of realtors.
Was it a private club?
It's a private club, a walled garden. To get access to the data, to see the listings, you have to be a member, which means you have to be a licensed agent and pay dues. It's a monopoly on the inventory.
So Redfin, as a brokerage, joined the MLS to get the data. But then they started using that data in ways the MLS didn't like. I'm looking at this fine from 2007.
The Northwest MLS fined Redfin $50,000 in May 2007.
50 grand is a lot for a startup, but the principle seems bigger. What did they do wrong?
They launched a feature called Sweet Bigs. Basically, they allowed users to post reviews of homes on the market on the Redfin website.
Like Yelp for houses. This kitchen smells like cat food, 2 stars.
Essentially, yes. They wanted to add a layer of subjective, crowdsourced truth to the listing data. A layer of transparency.
I can see why buyers would love that. Don't bother visiting this one, the foundation is cracked.
Yeah.
But I can see why sellers would lose their minds.
Oh, the sellers were furious. If you're trying to sell your home, the last thing you want is a permanent digital record of random strangers criticizing your carpet or your landscaping.
It devalues the asset.
It absolutely devalues the asset. But the MLS's argument was legal. We gave you this data to sell homes, not to disparage them.
It highlights the tension, doesn't it?
Okay.
Between a tech company wanting Yelp-style radical transparency and the guarded, protective nature of traditional real estate.
And in this case, the industry won. Redfin was forced to shut down the reviews. They paid the fine. It was a reality check. You can disrupt the tech, but you are still operating on the industry's rails.
But they didn't stop trying to push the envelope. In 2011, they launched a tool showing a real estate agent's sales history.
This was another fascinating attempt at transparency. They called it scouting reports. The idea was, how do you choose an agent? Usually it's a recommendation from a friend, right?
Or a face on a bus bench.
Or a face on a bus bench, exactly. Redfin wanted to make it data-driven. They wanted to show you exactly how many homes an agent had sold, in what neighborhoods, and crucially, their price drop stats. How often did they list a house too high and have to lower the price?
That sounds incredibly useful. If I'm hiring someone to sell my biggest asset, I want to know their track record.
It is useful in theory, but in practice, it backfired badly.
Right.
The data wasn't clean enough. The MLS data doesn't always perfectly link an agent to a sale in the way an algorithm can easily read. Sometimes there are co-listing agents, sometimes the names are spelled differently.
Got it.
So Redfin ended up publishing profiles that were inaccurate. They might say an agent sold 0 homes when they actually sold 10.
Oof. That is liability territory.
It is. You are messing with people's livelihoods. And that's a critical lesson here. In Silicon Valley, the motto is move fast and break things.
Right.
If your social media app has a bug, it's annoying. But if your real estate app tells the world that a top-performing agent is a failure because of a data glitch, you are causing real financial harm. The failure of the 2011 tool showed the limits of data scraping without rigorous quality control. They eventually had to discontinue it.
So they took some hits in the transparency wars. But they also had some massive wins on the tech side that stuck. In 2015, they launched 2 features that I think we now consider standard: the Redfin estimate and Book It Now.
Right. The Redfin estimate was their answer to Zillow's estimate. It's an automated valuation model, or AVM.
Which is that number at the top of the listing that tells you what the algorithm thinks the house is worth, regardless of the list price.
Exactly. And while agents hate these numbers because they are often off by 5–10%, consumers love them.
Oh, yeah.
It anchors the conversation. It challenged the idea that you needed a human appraiser to give you a rough idea of value.
And Book It Now.
That was purely about speed. It was an on-demand service for scheduling home tours. Again, think about the consumer expectation in 2015. You could order an Uber instantly. You could order dinner on Grubhub. Why did it take 3 phone calls, a voicemail, and a day of waiting just to get the code to see a house?
Right.
Redfin said, click this button and an agent will meet you there in an hour.
That is that instant gratification shift. They were successfully pushing the industry toward automation. So by 2015, they are a serious player. They've got the tech, they've got the brokerage in multiple cities, they have the employees. It's time to level up. Let's move to Section 3, going public and getting physical.
The IPO, July 28, 2017.
They ring the bell. They raise $138 million.
This marks the transition. They are no longer a scrappy startup. They are a major publicly traded company. They have shareholders now. They have quarterly earnings calls.
And with that cash infusion and that pressure to grow, they decided to make a very bold and, in hindsight, very risky move.
A very risky move.
We're talking about Redfin Now.
Redfin Now launched in June 2017. This was their entry into iBuying.
Okay, let's unpack iBuying, because this seems like a fundamental shift in what the company is. Before, they were a platform. They connected buyers and sellers. They took a fee. They were asset light.
Right. If you are a broker, you don't own the house. You just facilitate the trade. You have 0 inventory risk.
But with Redfin, now they are actually buying the house.
Exactly. They are moving from being a platform to being a principal. They are buying the asset directly from the seller, putting it on their own balance sheet, paying for the utilities, paying for the taxes, doing light renovations, and then reselling it.
Why on earth would they do that? Real estate is heavy, it's expensive, it breaks. Why take on that liability?
The logic was consumer friction. The traditional process of selling a home is miserable. You have to stage it. You have to leave your house every time someone wants to see it. You have to negotiate. The financing might fall through. It takes months. The pitch of iBuying was, we will write you a cash check right now. You can close in 7 days. No showings, no hassle.
So they were selling convenience.
They were selling certainty. And for that certainty, they charged a higher fee, usually 7% or more, plus a service fee. The idea was that they could make money on the fee and maybe a little on the home appreciation. They wanted to be the market maker.
They wanted to turn houses into stocks.
They wanted to turn real estate into a liquid asset, like a stock, yeah.
It sounds great for the seller. But for Redfin, that means they are suddenly holding millions, eventually hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate.
And that is a capital-intensive model.
Yeah.
To buy homes, you need debt. You need massive lines of credit. And you are exposed to market fluctuations. If the housing market drops 5% while you are holding those homes and you're operating on thin margins, you are underwater. You are losing money on every transaction.
We'll see how that plays out later. But they were also making other moves to capture more of the market. They acquired Walk Score way back in 2014, which I love, by the way, checking if I can walk to coffee.
It's a great feature.
And in 2019, they partnered with Open Door.
Right. acknowledging that they couldn't buy every house themselves, so they partnered with Open Door to offer instant offers to more people, sort of hedging their bets.
And then in 2021, they dropped a massive amount of money, $608 million to acquire RentPath.
This was a huge strategic play. RentPath owned apartment guide, rent.com. Lovely.
So why buy rental sites if you're a real estate brokerage? Renters don't pay commissions.
It's all about the customer acquisition cost, or CAC. Think about the life cycle of a person. You graduate college, you rent an apartment. 5 years later, you get married, you rent a bigger apartment. 3 years later, you buy a starter home. 7 years later, you buy a bigger home.
So Redfin wanted to own the funnel from the very beginning.
Exactly. Lease to deed. If they can get you using the Redfin ecosystem when you're 22 and looking for a studio, they have a relationship with you. When you're 30 and ready to buy, you're already in their database. They were attempting to capture the entire journey of a resident.
It makes sense on paper. But as they got bigger and as their algorithms got more influential, they started attracting a different kind of attention. Legal attention. And this brings us to Section 4, the fair housing controversy.
This is a really critical chapter in their history, and it requires us to look at the intersection of, well, math and civil rights.
In November 2020, several fair housing organizations sued Redfin. What was the specific accusation?
They accused Redfin of violating the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Specifically, they alleged that Redfin was engaging in a form of digital redlining.
Redlining, historically, being the practice where banks would literally draw red lines on maps around minority neighborhoods and refuse to lend there.
Correct. The accusation here was that Redfin was offering fewer services to home buyers and sellers in minority communities compared to white communities.
And what was the mechanism? Were they explicitly saying, we won't go to this zip code?
No, and that's why this is so complex. It wasn't explicit racism. It was policy based on home price. Redfin had a price minimum. They said, essentially, we cannot sell a home for under a certain dollar amount, say $150,000, because the commission we would earn isn't enough to cover the cost of our agent's time and salary.
Okay, stop there. From a Business 101 perspective, that sounds logical. If it costs you $5,000 to sell a home and you only make $3,000 in commission, you go out of business. It's margin protection.
That was Redfin's defense. This is just math. We are a business.
But the plaintiffs argued that the result of that math was discriminatory.
Exactly. This is the legal concept of disparate impact. The argument was, because of decades of historical racism and segregation, homes in minority communities are disproportionately lower priced. So if you draw a hard line and say, we won't serve homes under $150K, you are effectively drawing a line around those minority communities. You are denying them the superior Redfin service, the lower fees, the better photography, the marketing, solely because of the price, which serves as a proxy for race.
That is a fascinating and difficult ethical knot. If an algorithm optimizes for profit and the underlying data reflects historical inequality, the algorithm will replicate that inequality.
Precisely. And in housing, which is a regulated human right, you can't just say the algorithm made me do it. The lawsuit showed maps where Redfin offered best service in white neighborhoods and no service in adjacent minority neighborhoods. It was visually very stark.
How did that?
They settled in 2022. Redfin paid $4 million, which is a relatively small amount for them. But more importantly, they implemented policy changes. They agreed to remove the strict price minimums in many areas and implemented a new internal monitoring system to test for fair housing compliance.
So they essentially had to subsidize the lower cost homes.
In a way, yes. Or they have to find a way to make the service cheaper to deliver. It really highlights that tech companies in regulated spaces like housing face challenges that, say, a video game company doesn't. You can't just optimize for profit, you have to optimize for compliance and equity.
So we move into 2022. And if you follow the economy, or if you tried to buy a house recently, 2022 was the year everything changed.
It was the year the music stopped.
Section 5, contraction and the end of flipping.
It started with optimism, though. In April 2022, Redfin acquired Bay Equity Home Loans for nearly $138 million.
Again, vertical integration will help you find the house and will give you the mortgage.
It's a smart play. The mortgage is where the real money is in the transaction. But then the Federal Reserve stepped in.
Inflation spiked, and the Fed raised interest rates faster than they had in decades.
Mortgage rates went from 3% to 7% in a matter of months.
That is a violent shift. What did that do to Redfin's business model?
It froze the market, just put it on ice. Buyers couldn't afford the monthly payments, so they stopped buying. Sellers didn't want to trade their 3% mortgage for a 7% one, so they stopped selling. Volume plummeted.
And remember, Redfin has high fixed costs. They have all those W-2 employees.
Exactly. They have to pay the salaries even if nobody's buying houses. And crucially, they were also holding hundreds of homes in their Redfin Now flipping division.
And this is where the principal risk we talked about earlier explodes.
Yes. If you bought a house for $500,000 in March, hoping to sell it for $520,000 in May, but by May the market has cooled and the house is only worth $480,000, you are in trouble.
You're losing money just holding it.
We are losing money. Now multiply that by hundreds of homes.
In June 2022, they laid off 8% of their staff.
A warning shot. The first sign of trouble.
And then in November 2022, the big one, another massive round of layoffs, 13% of the staff, and a huge strategic pivot. They announced the death of Redfin Now.
They announced the wind down of the home flipping unit. This was a massive admission of defeat. They essentially said, we cannot make this math work.
Why did they kill it completely? Why not just pause it?
Because it was an existential threat to the company's solvency. They needed cash. They couldn't have hundreds of millions of dollars tied up in depreciating assets. They had to liquidate the portfolio, sell the homes at a loss, just to get the cash back to survive. It was a failed experiment in being a market maker.
So they retreat, they go back to basics, they focus on the website, the brokerage, and the software. They lick their wounds. And that brings us to the final chapter, the exit.
July 2025.
Redfin is acquired by Rocket Companies,
the parent company of Rocket Mortgage.
So as of today, February 2026, Redfin is a subsidiary. The independent journey is over. The stock ticker is gone.
It is. And if you connect the dots, this acquisition makes perfect, almost inevitable sense.
How so? Break down the synergy for us.
Think about what Rocket Companies is. They are a lender. They are a bank, essentially. They process loans. That is a commodity business. Their biggest cost is finding people who need loans.
Customer acquisition.
Right. They spend billions on Super Bowl ads and direct mail. But where is the customer before they need a loan?
They are on Redfin. They are looking at the map.
Exactly. Redfin has the eyeballs. They have the intent. They have millions of people signaling, I'm thinking about buying a house. By buying Redfin, Rocket secures the ultimate top-of-funnel lead generation machine. Redfin becomes the front door to the Rocket Mortgage factory.
It's the ultimate vertical integration. Rocket doesn't care if they make money on the real estate commission. They want the loan.
Correct. The lifetime value, or LTV, of a mortgage customer is huge. If Redfin breaks even as a brokerage but feeds Rocket 100,000 loans a year, the acquisition is a home run.
But looking back at the legacy here, Redfin started with an Innovator Award in 2006. They were the rebels. They wanted to kill the traditional broker. They wanted to make it cheap and easy. Did they succeed?
I think we have to reference that Bloomberg article from way back in 2013, why Redfin haven't killed off real estate brokers.
And the end.
The answer is no. They didn't kill the broker. In fact, to survive, they had become the broker. They hired agents, they joined the MLSs, they even started a partner agent program where they referred leads to traditional RE/MAX and Coldwell Banker agents because they couldn't hire enough of their own people.
They became part of the establishment they tried to disrupt.
In many ways, yes, but I would argue they also forced the establishment to change. Look at Zillow, look at Realtor.com, look at how traditional agents use tech now. The industry is significantly more transparent and digital because Redfin pushed it. They forced the MLSs to open up data. They forced the creation of better digital tools.
So they lost the war to dominate the industry, but they won the battle to modernize it.
That's a fair assessment. They proved you can digitize the search for a home. The search is now perfect. It's fun, it's fast, it's data-rich.
Yeah.
But the transaction, the actual buying and selling, that remains a messy, emotional, regulated, human-heavy process. You can't algorithm your way out of a correct foundation or a difficult negotiation.
And here's a final provocative thought to leave you with. Now that Redfin is owned by Rocket, a giant financial institution, does the mission of the commission refund survive? Or was that just a growth tactic for a startup that has now grown up?
That's the real question.
Yeah.
When a disruptor gets acquired by an incumbent, does the innovation continue? Or does Redfin just become a really nice, really expensive lead generation funnel for Rocket Mortgage? Does the consumer advocacy DNA survive inside a massive lending conglomerate?
Something to think about the next time you're scrolling through mansions you can't afford on your lunch break. The map is free, but the machinery behind it is expensive. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into Redfin. We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.